right, I'm with my friend, Pastor Trent Cornwell. Trent serves as the pastor of Vision Baptist Church. Trent, thank you for being with us today, and grateful. Let's talk, if we could, today about missionary care. You've done this a long time as a fellow helper, now as a pastor, even many who you've seen helped along the way to jump into missions, and maybe many from your youth group when you served as youth pastor. So maybe we could start right there. We had something in our missions conference. Maybe you could share with us what was there and your heart for missionary care.
You know, I've really been awakened to how important missionary care is over the last several years. As you both know, in our early 20s, a lot of energy was get around mobilizing, getting people to the field, and God blessed, and I'm thankful for that. And we still want to be involved in that. But having friends that have now been on the field for well over a decade or even longer, just growing in my understanding of the challenges that they face. All of us have challenges, whatever assignment God's given us in life, in the ministry, in a vocational ministry or not a vocational ministry, whatever job you have has unique challenges, but the missionary faces some very tough situations that even all these years after having friends on the field, that my understanding is it keeps growing. So as you said, that was our theme of our missions conference this year, was going to be about missionary care. How do we encourage our church to hold the rope tightly, if you will? And so this was our statement. We put it on the walls, plastered it everywhere, did it so many times that I should memorize it, but I still have it right there in case I get it wrong, because each word really matters to me. So we took a long time to kind of curate this statement or axiom, and we want to focus on. So it's this: it is our joyful labor as a church to develop, send, and care for covenant members in a worthy manner. And we take that from 3 John, the idea of sending people after a godly sort, that there's a standard that is high about the way we should care for one another as we take the gospel. So first thing is joyful labor. That's important.
Yeah, amen.
We've seen that, right? When the joy leaves, the ministry stops.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
simple. You do not continue very long, or you continue and the ministry changes if there isn't joy that is there. That happens so many times. We start redefining what we're supposed to be doing. So we got to help one another. We're supposed to. The Bible would tell us that we are laborers together, and we should fight for one another's joy, and that's a way we can help. Mm-hmm. And when missionaries come home, and it'll be refreshing.
Now, how's a practical way that you could help a missionary continue with his joy? Some reminders, maybe reaching out, or praying for them, or what are some practical steps?
Here lately, I've really been burdened about the furlough time or coming home. I always saw it as a break from missionaries, as it should be, but heard a missionary wife say that when missionaries come home, it feels like they're trying to keep 100 balloons in the air at any given time. And just, you can imagine trying to do that, how hard it is. And so when they're home, they have family responsibilities, church responsibilities, updating churches responsibilities. It's just so much that it could become a time that isn't refreshing. I always think of the Apostle Paul as a macho, Rambo kind of guy, right? He doesn't seem to need a whole lot of support in these things. But he uses words like, I wanted to come by because it would be refreshing.
Yeah.
I was reading just the other day, and I forget how it said, but he was expressing how he needed encouragement. And so that's one. And so before they come home, trying to communicate with him and making a game plan.
Yeah.
And when you're going to be home, these are some reasonable expectations, and we want to help you make a game plan for that. Try to figure out what they want to see accomplished with their kids. Yeah.
Now, before we go a little bit further, let me stop on that furlough part. I read something that you just wrote to our missionaries, actually, about furlough. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you said your recommendation would be a third of their time would be at their home church. Is that correct?
Yeah, I reached out.
Which totally makes sense. I'm asking,
yeah.
Let's discuss it a little bit. I love the idea.
I would reached out to a pastor that wrote called Ascending Church to Find. It's like Bradley Bell, and he said that in one of his books. So I called him like, how did you come up with that? Why did y'all think that? And obviously a verse in the Bible that tells us that, and it seemed to be charitable and reasonable, because they do have, even though they're out of our church, they are partnered with other churches. We're partnered with other churches, and so they need to be available. And then they may have family across the country they need to go to, but it allows them enough time to identify with fellow members and just enjoy being part of the church that they're sent out of. And then hopefully, if they come back to a healthy and joyful environment, they're going to want to go back to that and
Yeah.
say, I want to create this. I want God to use me to create this for people on the field.
Yeah.
And
Amen. No, I love that idea. They're out there maybe raising more support, maybe updating the churches, maybe some family time, maybe some prep time on, getting ready for the next step when they go back. But that part, it's not only for them to be at the church, it's also for the church to see them and, to pray for them, to help them. They could be encouraged if they've got young people, as far as kids, whatever stage of life they're in, to be plugged in their home church. I think it makes total sense. And I think it's a great thing. And so maybe speaking to missionaries, we would say a third of your time, just mark it down in your mind, be around your home church, help and serve. And, the people that are giving to you and praying for you, then be a blessing to them, right? Life is a give and a take, right? And, but maybe for pastors or church ministers that will be listening, what are some things that they can do with the missionary in that third, so the pressure's not all on the pastor, like, oh man, now I got to come up with a plan. And like, what are just some simple ways, like, no pressure on you, but let them be around, encourage them when they're around, let them, be involved, do something. What are some of the things that you can help the missionary or pray for the missionary as he's there on that third of the time that he's on furlough?
there's so many wonderful stories that come out of missionaries being home on furlough. So many young people are motivated from those friendships. So many, when I talk to a missionary and I hear about the struggles they have on the field, it often helps me have better attention to what I'm doing, right?
Right.
And so there's because they're disciple makers. They're preaching the gospel, but they're disciple makers, which means the connection point from a church member to a missionary, they have a covenant one to another. And so that's in this statement here that we would develop, send, and care for our covenant members is to decide in advance that if God has placed us in the same church and we have made a covenant one to another, our church has a covenant. I imagine most or all Baptist churches have a covenant together. Part of our covenant has to do with the propagation of the gospel around the world.
Yeah.
And so just if you're a church member listening to this, I would say don't even go ahead and decide before the missionary comes home that you already have a connection to that person, that God has a role for you to play in their lives. There doesn't have to be, let's see if we connect or let's see if we're compatible or whatever.
Sure.
You are compatible. God
Yeah,
put you in the same church. You may have kids the same age, you may not have the same, but you have a connection. And so one, it's just making that as a non-negotiable. If there's a missionary sent out of our church, I want to know and I want to care for them. And so that helps. And then understand that the life that they live on the field has unique challenges, but it's not another planet.
Sure.
The things that you struggle with your teenage kids are the same thing they're struggling with their teenage kids. The problems that you have in discipleship are same problems that they may have in discipleship. And they're just normal people wanting to have normal conversations in life. And then invite them. I fall into this sometimes, and missionaries have really helped me, is like, I think, well, they're out there planting churches and they're doing all these things. They don't want to help me give out cookies at Vacation Bible School. No, that's not who they are at all.
Right.
They are servants.
Yeah, amen.
And it's fun to serve together. I mean, that is the thing we do. So consider including them in what you're doing.
Amen.
Ask them to help you out. And it leads to great conversations.
Okay, so the furlough time, helping them become joyful, maybe through recommendations you give of reading, or maybe through praying for them and that communication, different things. So you're developing on the side of the church family that, as we had that statement for our missions conference, how do we develop? I'm no longer, I don't serve on the mission field. So how do I develop to maintain that right heart, or make sure that my both my giving and my heart and my mindset, how do I develop the right mindsets for the Great Commission?
Right. The Bible is it's all interconnected. And so when we're studying the Bible as we should, and we're walking through passages of the Bible, and Spurgeon was a great example of this. If you read any sermons about Spurgeon, If you haven't ever listened to Spurgeon, a good percentage of my sermons are stolen from Spurgeon. No, I'm just kidding. I can't even pull it off. The beard's the only thing I think that I can maybe aspire to. I love his quotes, but he was constantly bringing into his sermons because it shows up there in the passages. So the question here, we're talking, I used to say sin, 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 like all the time. Sin, S-E-N-D, not sin, all right? Sin missionaries. And sin, but now we add in that statement, develop, send, and care for our missionaries. And so the members of the church know that they have a commitment financially to the missionaries in which they send. They know that they should be there for some special occasions, but you ought to consider when a 16-year-old kid in your church has aspirations, and that's what he has. He aspires to be a missionary, that at that point you ought to connect with them and try to help them develop and grow. You may not have that luxury. It may be a person's already now farther along in life and you're trying to develop that relationship. But one of the things would be is to start as soon as possible in helping them. I think about a man in our church that works for an insurance company, and we have a young man that he asked, how can I take what I have and use it to see these missionaries prepared? And he's helped them get good jobs, and in those jobs they're developing different skill sets. And he's like, I don't know how to do a lot of things on the field, but I know how to lead a meeting.
Yeah.
So I can teach him how to lead a meeting, because a lot of church planning is leading a meeting.
Yeah.
So take what's in your hand, right?
Yeah.
What is it was said of Moses and there in Exodus? What is in your hand? Yeah, that rod.
Amen.
So every church member ought to think, what is the gifting that God has given me? What do I have? How do I share it with those missionaries?
Amen.
Missionaries have to do a whole lot. They got to be graphic designers. They got to be omnicompetent. They think they got to know a little bit of everything, and that's not fair to them. And so God's gifted you in a way, and you ought to be looking for a way. You ought to be pioneering. That's what we said before. You ought to be pioneering and find a way to use your resources and your skill set to help them. And pray to the Lord. Ask him to show you.
Yeah.
And, one of the best ways to do it is just sit down and have an honest conversation with the missionary and say, this is what I have. This is what I'm doing. What's going on in your life? And honestly, as you and I both know, listening to them and just being a friend is just so important. Mm-hmm. Randy Sturwalt, great missionary, planted so many churches there in Kenya. Sitting across the table with him in Kenya years ago with a friend of mine inside of the church who had many resources and many talents. He could make a lot of things happen. He asked Randy, what do you need? And Randy said, this right here is what I need.
Amen.
I just need a cup of coffee with a friend who will listen, who'll help me think biblically, which is what we all so much should in life. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a big blessing our church has been to not just the missionary, but to the missionary children. And, they're going through awkward stages as far as in life in general, maybe as a young person, but also leaving from where they were, speaking another language, different culture, to coming back, and do I even fit in? And I think our church has helped them a lot. And so maybe you could speak to, on the missionary side, your children need to be in a steady, stable place, as opposed to traveling around everywhere. Yeah, that's called deputation. And even some of the furlough, but your children need to be in a place where they can grow and they can have friends and they can learn the Bible, stories and different things. But on the church side, how can we help, missionary children as they're in there, because even maybe some of the silly things they do, they're probably just trying to, where do I fit in? What do I do? How could we serve them? Because anybody who's serving the Lord, they're standing on the shoulders of a whole lot of people. And there's always, in my case, I even heard some of your stories of the people who've helped you, that older lady. But I know of Mr. Henderson and Mr. Richardson and people that helped me learn life lessons to get to where I am. And that's church people who have developed the aspirations in those young people. How could we help really our missionary kids?
I love that question. I say, because I can't think of a better way to say it, but I tell our church, our young people should have an unfair advantage in life because they were raised among us, because we're going to be so committed to them. I don't know if my kids are going to listen to this. And your kids, one of them will, and it'll get back to them. The teenagers are on the awkward tadpole part of life, right?
Yeah, right.
They're not a frog yet. They don't know who they are, and it doesn't matter where they're going through their teenage years. It's challenging, but to do it in two different cultures has to be even harder. And so, one, being aware of it and listening to one of the best things that I've done that I haven't always done is just listen to missionaries and give them an opportunity to tell us how we can help them because they don't want to be critical. They're grateful for what the church is providing. So it takes a little bit of encouragement. And one practical step that we've recently learned, we've implemented in our calendar planning for this coming year, is to try to anchor some things down where they're always the same every year. So when a missionary is coming in, they can say, well, I know that the graduation service is going to be the first Sunday of June. I know that camp is going to be this time,
Yeah.
and 5 or 6 things because their calendar planning is an algorithm, and they can't set aside 3 Sundays in June to be at their home church,
Right.
but they can set a few aside which are important. And then as the teenagers grow, showing attention to them and helping them know and helping the missionary family know when it comes time for them to make that step from where they're at on the mission field into their adult life and college and all that, we want to be here for you, whatever that looks like.
Amen.
Many of our missionary families don't have that family support group, that they don't just come back to one town and have everybody like many of us would have. And so reminding them that we are that for them.
Amen. Amen. I appreciate that. Sometimes we think when we think of missionary care, just the big rocks per se, like let's make sure they got a car to drive and let's make sure they got a place to rent. And certainly those things are important, but that's not even close to the most important. And the things that you said about listen to them or just be their friend or be a place that they can plug in or, help their kids and, be that system, that root, system that they need when they come back. I think that's fabulous. And that's missionary care. And, okay, in closing, could you read one more time the statement that our church used? It's rather long, and so I don't remember it. So how about
Actually,
you?
I will give it to you. I'll see if I get it right this time, okay?
All right, let's see it.
It is our joyful labor to develop, send, and care for our covenant members.
Boom.
Got it.
Good job.
Oh, wait. In a worthy manner.
There you go.
That's the part. And the worthy manner means we're sending, we're honoring God in the way that we go about it.
Yeah.
They are not God. They're not what's special about it. It's what they're carrying.
Yeah.
John's such a great book for missions, but it says, if a person is taking the gospel somewhere, you should be a fellow helper of the truth. And so as we love the gospel, we love those that carry it.
Amen.
And that means in a friendship, sometimes it means having hard conversations. They don't just want people that cheer them on all the time. That's not a friendship.
Sure. Yeah.
Sometimes you could be sitting with a missionary and they could be thinking about something wrong. Satan's on their back, being the accuser of the brethren, and you need to say no. Stop thinking like that.
Amen.
That's one of my favorite things about visiting the mission field. It's a real blessing, the time in which we live at, that we get to travel. There's never been a time in human history that a person would have the ability to have as easily as the American would have to travel to see the mission field. But that moment, this last year with Jason Holt in Chile, to see what God had been doing. For him, it's work day after day. I'm getting a Polaroid shot. I'm seeing growth and growth and growth.
Sure.
He's seeing day after day. But to put my arm around him and look out upon one of the churches there and say, isn't this wonderful?
Yeah.
Because typically the missionary comes to our church and they're supposed to be promoting missions is important. Help me stay on the field. And they come in for that 1 week or weekend for a missions conference. But what ought to happen is when they come to your church, you're looking at them and say, missions is important.
Yeah, amen.
And they're like, well, I know I live on the field. They live on the field, but it doesn't mean that Satan doesn't accuse them and discourage them. Yeah. And so we ought to preach missions to missionaries.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. I like that. Missionary care, preach missions to missionaries. Amen. I love it. Well, I appreciate you being with us today. Thank you very much for what you do and who you are and what God's used you to do. And I appreciate that very much. Thank you, dear friends, for being with us today.